Good day and welcome to the IABC, International Association of Business Communicators, Circle of Fellows. This is episode number 61. It's an opportunity where 4 or 5 IABC Fellows get together to talk about a very, very timely and critical topic in the field of corporate and organizational communication. My name is Brad Whitworth, and I am going to be the host sitting in for Shell Holtz, who normally occupies this seat. And we've got a wonderfully timely topic to discuss today. It's the concept of open book management. And as the world goes through sort of this return from pandemic season at some point, different places experiencing different exercises, we're looking for not just the opportunity to bounce back, but as one television ad is talking about, bouncing forward and finding new ways for organizations to behave. And while open book management is not something new, a lot of people are giving it a lot more thought than before. So to join me and talk about this topic, I've got 3 of my IABC fellows with me. And I'll let each one tell you where they are and what it is that they're up to these days, starting with Amanda Hamilton Atwell.
It's good evening from my side of the world. I am in Pretoria in South Africa. And I have a consulting business DNA, and we work with communication. We help organizations to improve their communication with the employees. So open book management is something that we are very serious about.
And making my way around, at least on my screen, the semicircle, why don't we go to Todd Hattori?
Hello, I'm in Seattle, Washington, where I am an organization performance consultant with EY. And so with all of my clients, we talk about how do we make sure we maintain a employee-centric view as well as a customer-centric view, and open book management is critical to achieving both.
And then geographically, in between Amanda and Todd, we've got Jim Schaefer.
Thank you, Brad. Yes, I'm Jim Schaefer, and I'm in Annapolis, Maryland. And I've spent a good deal of time in the concept of open book management. I worked very closely with Jack Stack, the founder of it, and have implemented open book management in a number of companies. So I'm looking forward to the conversation to hear some of the other things that other people are doing.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that will most benefit the audience and make this discussion sort of lively, is that we have people who have had real world experience in implementing things around the concept of open book management, which I said is not a new idea. It's been around. I think John Case wrote about it, and as you mentioned, Mr. Stack was the person at SRC Holdings who probably was most famous for implementing it. There was the first appearance of this was in Inc. magazine in 1993, a great Harvard Business Review piece in about 1997 written by the duo. And the concept, just to set the ground rules so that you have an idea of what it is that they were proposing and how it's been implemented. 3 basic principles in this great game of business is all employees should know and management should teach the rules so they get the measures of business success taught to them and they understand them. Then there's sort of a way of measuring and keeping score that employees should be able to use their knowledge of their work to be able to improve performance of the organization. And then also, maybe very, very importantly, is provide a stake in the outcome. There should be a way that every employee can see their actions helping drive success for the organization. Also, the flip side of that is remove some of that risk of failure. And so then Case went on to add a little bit more, but the company really needs to share financial information as well as just sort of critical operational details with employees. Employees really are challenged to move the numbers in a way that improves the company, and then employees find a way to share in company prosperity. So I guess my first question would be, is this something that could work for any company, or is it better for some organizations than others?
Well, I think it depends on the leadership. Can it work for any company? I've worked with a number of different industries, and I think exactly what you said is that Open book management is creating a business of business people who think and act like business owners. So it's fundamental that we start with the numbers, the financial numbers, and we identify what we need to have, and then where are the opportunities to improve. I think a lot of people in the communication profession right now would find this an interesting subject, and here's why. For a long time, communication practitioners were activity-oriented, get things out, distribute things, produce videos, and that sort of thing. And one of the things I'm hearing and I'm getting a lot of questions about from people is, well, how do I make the shift from activity focused to results and value focused? That is, I create results that the business cares about, and I add value in that the cost of increasing the results is less than the results you created. And so one of the beautiful things about open book management is it's all focused on creating results and value. And people have the resources that they need to be able to take their organization to a higher level. I was able to spend a lot of time over the years at SRC Corporation, now SRC Holdings, and that's Jack Stack's business. And I took a number of my clients, communication clients there, and they got to see things firsthand. And the thing that I heard most was they blew my socks off. I have never seen that degree of openness among everybody in the organization and the incredible successes that they have as a result of. It's a very, very different but fascinating area.
Now, Amanda, the question I've had sort of is there's some companies that are required to share some numbers publicly, but then a lot of companies tend to hold on to, especially financial information, closely. Is this better for private organizations than public, or vice versa, or does it really matter?
I agree with Jim that it is the leadership will have a major impact on will it be open book or will it be closed book. But my experience is that, in a real small company, everything is open in any case. People are very involved in the numbers. But when the company grows into a mid-level, it seems as if the management tend to get more secretive. And when it is a real big global company, the experience that I have with the global companies that I work with is that they are totally open. The people work with the real numbers, and they work with the numbers that actually impact on their part of the business. So they will not work with, the corporate numbers because it's too far removed, but they work with, this is what we have, this is what we need to produce, this is what it costs to produce. If we improve this is the impact that it will have, and this will be the bonus that we will get if we keep the quality, keep the safety, and keep the performance levels, then we will get the bonus. But something else that I want to raise is that I think the new interest in open book management is as a result of remote work, because more and more people feel alienated from the organization. They sit there and they work. It's been 6 months now that they've been working on their own. They have these, yes, virtual meetings, but it is not like in real. And my view is that because working with numbers, giving the people the real business information, make them feel, okay, even though we are working remotely, we are still working towards the same numbers. We're still working towards the same targets. And for me, that is the reason why more organizations are now communicating that they have open book management, because they might have had it, but now they're just telling the people, we have open book management, and this is why we share everything, and this is why we want you to be part of this conversation.
Yeah, I could add to Amanda's comments that it's really right-sizing the numbers for employees. So communicating at the corporate level, the global corporate level, a lot of employees don't know what they mean to those numbers. And so it's a cascading the cascading the impact is critical. You have your global numbers. How does it then translate to perhaps region numbers, then to local numbers? Within local, you're looking at functional or department numbers. Within departments, you're then looking at numbers that are at the work team level. And so that helps employees understand how their bit of the work contributes to the broader, larger scope, and it makes it more real. When you give them the big corporate numbers, it's hard for people who are down on the front lines to understand, how does my job really contribute to that big number that's so far out there? And I think the pandemic, I try to look for the positives in this pandemic. What the pandemic has offered to us, and I think Amanda was touching on this too, is that we know that there will be financial impact. So how do we translate that into real language that employees can understand, so that they feel safe and secure in the jobs that they have and feel committed to the organizations that they work for?
One of the interesting concepts behind open book management is that the good ideas and the room for improvement is all coming from the people at the front line. It's sort of a bubble up, as opposed to, in a lot of organizations historically, it's like the senior leaders know best, and it's a top-down driven, we'll make the decisions, we'll set the numbers, we'll drive this. How tough is it to get that cultural change going among senior leaders before we can even step in as communications people?
Well, there's no doubt about it. That is something that has to happen. If you're a controlling organization, autocratic organization, old line organization, and you need to start moving in this direction, there are several different ways that you can do it. One of the things that Jack said in his latest book called Change the Game is that, which I've also endorsed, one of the things that he says in here is, don't think top down, bottom up. That's old thinking. Think about lateral conversations, people collaborating to get the job done better. And that's exactly, if you go to SRC and you go on the floor, as a lot of communication people have done when I've taken them down there, that's the stuff that they don't understand. They haven't seen that in many cases. So we're acting as equals here. We're talking as equals, and we're improving the same things. That's number one. Number two piece of it is that if you're a large organization, like let's say FedEx, FedEx says, well, we're going to start moving toward open book management. Well, maybe we're not going to make the whole company open book right away, but maybe we're going to do what we did with FedEx, and we started focusing on export income, and how do we start helping all of the people in the organization, in a particular in one of their businesses, get there. They got there, and then they started establishing it in other parts of the organization. That's what ITT did when I worked with them, Ryder Logistics and others. Don't necessarily start at the top and say, we're going to blast away at this new concept. We're going to take it piecemeal to the extent, but we're going to have push behind it all the time.
I agree with you that it should be done in a staggered way, because I think if an organization decides that it wants to change the game and suddenly open up the books, and the people do not know what to do with it. So for me, the education part of what does these numbers actually mean is very important. And without that education and without a proper, consistent communication campaign to create awareness about what is this all about, and how, what are the benefits and what are the downsides. We trust you. We as management trust you. So how are you going to deal with this trust? So the training and the consistent communication about this is imperative.
The one thing that Jack also does incredibly well, and I've been working with him for 15 to 20 years now. One of the things that I've seen from the very beginning, and I was just down at their Great Games last year, spoke down there in Dallas that they have every year. And the one thing that Jack does, and he teaches people this, is to teach people. So he does a lot of teaching, a lot of asking, a lot of what do you think? And he keeps that in front of a lot of people, and people want to be like Jack in the organization, and so they ask people too, and they teach too, and so that's a very, very big piece of it. And I think that that's in part one of the biggest pieces of it in terms of its impact on the organization as a whole, the leadership teaching.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge opportunity for the communicators, taking it out of financial language to what makes sense for employees. So even as you do a phased introduction, phased approach, it's important for the communicator to make sure that you're communicating to the entire organization. Here's why we're taking a phased approach. Here's information that will help you when it's your turn, your team or your department or area's time to transition. We're going to share information as we go through this phased approach so that you know what's going on, what we're learning through this process, because obviously there's going to be changes as you start to implement within throughout the organization. So huge opportunity for communicators to make sure there's transparency and full understanding of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're learning from the process.
Before we go too much further, just a reminder, you're tuned into the Circle of Fellows. Number 61 is the episode, and we're talking about open book management with 3 people who are experts in this from around the world: Amanda Hamilton-Atwell, Tasha Torrey, and Jim Schaefer. I would like to throw sort of a monkey wrench into this and just sort of ask the anti-question. Is there a case for not putting in open book management? Why would a senior leadership team, why would communications people not want to do this? Is there a legitimate business reason to not proceed in this direction?
Well, I think fear, probably, particularly if they're not very bright or if they're not very good at it. Maybe they came from a place that never shared information, that they came from a place with a father who was a tyrant and lived a life of everything is top down, everything is control. I would imagine they'd be very uncomfortable in an open book management kind of a business. But if they got in there and sat down, we told them to be quiet and watch this 2-hour session, they would walk out saying what I said earlier, and they're blown away, and they use that language.
My experience is that organizations where they have a very negative relationship with unions tend to withhold information because they always fear that if they really share the numbers openly, that it will be used against them by the union.
Now, I've seen some arguments against that say that oftentimes it comes down to pay sorts of issues, that if people really saw all the numbers and saw how much senior leaders were getting paid for what little contributions theoretically they make to the organization, that sort of works against open book management style. And then even this idea of we helped make it possible, how come we haven't seen instant gratification? You promised, when are we going to see our cut? As sort of another one where, again, the reward system better be in sync with the communication system.
Yeah, but that's assuming that there's that control still. There's that fracturing between 2 groups of people. I think what open book management does, if you follow what Jack Stack style, SRC style, and a whole lot of other organizations that follow them, is that you don't see, there isn't that kind of hierarchy in the room. The discussions in the room are about hitting the numbers and what is holding us back and where do we need to emphasize more. When I'm in those kind of companies, and I've been in lots of them, I don't hear people acting as though that they are better than, or their title, or they're working at a number. Numbers drive what they do. It's not about guilt or history or control.
But I think that is also maturity of the leadership.
Of course.
If they don't trust, and as I said, if they have a negative relationship with the unions, it tends to be more difficult for them. But if they have an open relationship with the unions, because the union leaders, if they are mature, they also understand that it's all about numbers, and we must make these numbers work for our people to have employment.
Yeah.
Is there a good way to implement this? I mean, is it better to do this for a company that's performing well, or is it okay to introduce something like this when the company is performing poorly? I mean, is there a timing issue, sort of which is easier? Can it be done equally well in both sort of situations?
Well, the idea behind Open Book is to help employees better understand how they contribute to the organization. So even in a situation where the organization is not doing well, this is how you can get your employees on board. Help them understand the critical role that they play in the success in the organization so that they can commit to always looking for how can you improve the numbers? How can I, wherever I sit within the organization, identify those opportunities to optimize or to make things better, to fix things that are broken. And so it gives a voice to employees, even in situations where the company's not doing well.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Todd. You remind me of work that we did with ITT Corporation. And one of the things that we focused on was operating income, and operating income was their financial target. And so we set up a whole lot of processes inside the organization that were focused on really open book management so that people had the kinds of information they need to improve operating income from whatever perspective that they were coming from. And so this was brand new to them, but they had fun doing it because they had blackboards and they had scoreboards up and they had regular team meetings, and they were all focused on those numbers that were very, very critical. In that particular case, over a period of about 3 or 4 months, they increased on-time delivery by 38%, and they were able to reduce accidents from 13 to 0, and they increased their OI by a significant amount. So that's one way to approach it. Ryder Logistics did it a little differently. FedEx did it differently, but it's not. One of the things I don't like hearing is about hierarchy, and these people need to tell these people, and these people need to tell these people. In an open book organization, it's not about them or us. This is a team working together. The thing that is common is that financial sheet, the cash flow statement, the income statement, and the balance sheet.
Yeah. My experience is also that if there is sufficient recognition for we are focused on this number and we want to improve this number, and we actually succeeded in improving this number, to give the people recognition, verbal recognition, but also somehow have a recognition system that would make it, financially beneficial for them to improve numbers and to improve the results of the company. Because if that is not there, it is like we play, and I like the name of the book, Change the Game. For me, all these numbers are just a scoreboard of the game called business. And if I score a try in a game and nobody cares, why would I go on scoring tries? If I understand what I must do to score a try, but nobody else cares, why bother? And I think that is so important. And again, for me, that is where communication comes in. That we have a system that we can really share the successes of these people at at all levels, in all groups. Make people aware that people know the numbers and they are impacting on the numbers.
I like that a lot.
Is there I guess the question that also comes to my mind is how much education, how much training, how much reinforcement do one need to do? Do you need to make CPAs out of your entire workforce for them to be able to read things like the public statements, 10Qs, or is there a lot of effort put into, I'll call it sort of the simple version of the performance numbers? And we touched a little bit on that because in some organizations you want to make the numbers meaningful and local, but how much extra effort in creating this sort of the numbers story where historically communications people have always done the words stories?
Well, I think it's going to vary. I think I probably said it's going to vary a lot of times today. But I was thinking of the FedEx situation in Los Angeles. We selected a pilot for the organization because we didn't want to take it everywhere at the very beginning. So we started with Los Angeles. And we brought 13 people together representing all disciplines of the organization. And over a period of about 90 days, we identified what the barriers were to increasing exports. We had identified why it was happening. We did root cause analysis, and the people in the room were everything from the head of the operation in Los Angeles to first line supervisors and employees and people who flew airplanes and that sort of thing. But the way we did it was slow to some extent, but over a 90-day period, we had a 23% increase in export volume and a 1,500% return on investment. We then took it to 5 more locations: Seattle, Denver, Chicago, New York, and Miami. And we had an 1,667% return on investment and a significant improvement in export volume. So, well, we did it that way. We started out slowly, and then we took it to 5 other locations, and they said from that point on, everybody is going to now start doing at FedEx what we did in those 6 locations. In another organization, like I mentioned earlier about ITT, we did it by teaching, by coaching, by scoreboarding, and that sort of thing. So I don't think there's any one way to do it, but the main thing is to get the they out of things, and we're all working together to hit that same number, and we're all going to benefit when we do.
I think the number one thing that I hear from my clients, regardless of where they're located, the size of the organization, is that employees feel that they have too much on their plate. They are working long hours, working weekends. So expecting people to become financially literate is not, many employees are not going to take that well. So that's where the translating it into meaningful language that I can relate to, regardless of where I sit in the organization, is helpful and helps people better understand. It's not just this spreadsheet with lots of numbers on it that I can't make sense of. It actually translates to how I behave, how I interact with others, the decisions that I make, the actions that I implement, or even how often or whether I'm willing to raise my hand and say, let's fix this because it's not working.
I think there's also another aspect to OpenBook management, and that, when it's been implemented, that we measure, do the people understand why they're doing it? Does it make sense to them? Do they understand these concepts? Or is it, just another thing that we just, we just lie low, it will go away. So I think it's very important that when a company decides to do that, and if the company has the results that Jim mentioned, obviously it is a success. But how many people understand that? Do they want to get involved in it? And if they say, really, like Todd said, I've got so much on my plate, I manage this thing, I just want to do my work and you do the rest. And if we are serious about OpenBook management, then we should have a campaign to tell the people why it is important and why everybody will benefit if people get involved in OpenBook management. Because otherwise it is just another thing. Even though we want to make it bottom up, it is a decision that was taken at the top to say, we're now going to have OpenBook management. So we should ask the employees, how do they experience it and what do they understand? And is it a concern to them? Is it a threat to them? Does it add to their stress levels because now suddenly they must manage money as well? I think we need to measure as well.
I think you're absolutely right. One of the things that I talk to a lot of people in organizations about it, I don't go out and say, well, we're going to go fix this. What do you think about that? I happen to believe, and I say this a lot to my clients, is people who do the job every day know better how to do that job than anybody else in the company. So let's go do some listening. I was up working with a company up in upstate New York, and all the people who were on the line were saying, well, we can't get the job done because of such and such, or we can't meet the delivery time such and such. And I said at one point, well, if you had some other resources or knowledge, how much could you take off of that, the problem waste is what it was. And they said probably about 2 hours for a given point of time. And I said, why don't you think about figuring out how are you going to put that together? What resources do you need that you think is going to take that 2 hours away? We took more than 2 hours away. They took more than 2 hours away. And 2 hours away in this particular incident was about $200,000 to the organization. So what I'm a big believer in is get these people involved in the thing, help them identify what the problem is, help them identify what the barrier is, help them identify what the root cause is, help them identify implementing a solution that makes the place a lot better. Simple, isn't it?
The concept is great and very, very simple. Is there a risk in sharing financial information so broadly? I mean, do we run the risk in a publicly traded company, for example, of making employees insiders, and they're subject to even more restrictions in terms of stock and trading and this sort of stuff, and the SEC in the US could come slamming down on individuals? Or are there managers who fear that this information could, in the hands of a disgruntled employee, end up helping competitors and reluctance to share? Is there a risk on that side of it?
I think in the embryonic stages of moving to open book management, everything you said is absolutely right. I think that those kinds of fears do happen. But I think that, you know, one of the things that I see in these companies is that they pretty early on really understand that they're going to be highly involved like they weren't before. They're going to be cared for, I don't mean take care of, but valued. And there's going to be a feeling that takes over in the organization. Is that going to be happening on day one and day two? Absolutely not. That's why I suggest that in most cases we start small and we grow it by showing that we can make these successes happen, and that we do a lot better job when we get these people in here who talk now very differently. I was talking to a truck driver at SRC one day, and I asked him, I said, is this your truck? He says, yeah. I said, what's you going to do? He said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to try to knock 22 cents per mile off of this one, and we're going to pick up some, and started mentioning all these numbers. Here's a truck driver that looked like a truck driver, dressed like a truck driver, but he was very, very educated about the finances of the business. I don't think for the world that he would go out and tell anybody on the outside that here's what's going on inside, because he would be at risk if I gave that information out. Now, I don't mean the first day, Brad, but I'm talking about once we start building people to understand that they value that information, and they're going to be the last people in the world that's going to share it with anybody.
Open book management doesn't mean that you are sharing every last detail of your finances.
Right.
And so helping employees understand that we're sharing this financial information because we know that it ties directly to the work, the contributions that you make is important. Organizations are responsible for also helping employees understand any potential risk or a damage that can be caused if too much is revealed. So, helping employees understand open book management concept is that we share this information because we know you can help us achieve those numbers, help improve those numbers, but we're not sharing everything because that will put the organization at risk.
Now, are some industries more open to open book management? I guess if I'm sitting as a communications person listening to this, does this, a manufacturing facility where I've got things like quality and shipments and those sorts of things, is it work just as well there as it might in a financial services institution? I'm just trying to wrap my head around this concept of where does this fit best into the work style of different kinds of organizations?
I don't. I think that anybody starting out is not going to be driven by, okay, I'm a manufacturing person, therefore I'm going to be more amenable to this than if I'm in financial services. I think that what we've seen, or I've seen, is most industries that are looking for new and better ways to do great work, and I think that there are opportunities. See that there's a track record out there, and other people have advanced their organization using these concepts. I think there's going to be an interest and a hunger for it. Is this going to be for everybody? Probably not. But I think when you see the kind of results that the open book management companies get, and when you go to the great game that they have in Dallas every year, you've got industries all over the place. And they're all going into the rooms and learning, and then they go into the next room because this one's about another subject about open book. You see hunger for, this is the stuff that works. I want to be a part of what works.
Mm.
I think the critical factor is, we mentioned it earlier, is that it really depends on the leadership and how they follow through on the commitment. So as they communicate, here's how we're implementing open book management within the organization, how do they follow through with that? Do their behaviors match their words? And so I don't know it's necessarily industry or markets as much as it is the commitment of the organization in living up to the words that they are expressing.
I agree with you, Todd. I had another quote from Jack's Change the Game here. Focus on the critical number you're trying to improve, the one that provides organizational focus and that everyone can influence. So-called messaging becomes old way because the focus is less on talking points and more on the numbers that represent the real game that's being played in business. I think that typifies a lot of what I see, not only with Jack, but also with other companies who do that. This messaging goes away. Communication people are not in the messaging business. Communication people are in the business making sure people have the information they need, and also that they're tapping into the information. So it's moving sideways and up as much as it is moving up.
Now, does that run counter to the broad trend in communication circles right now, which is to try to take every leader and turn them into a master storyteller? Or is there a way to do numbers and stories?
Well, I think this
got everybody on that one.
Okay, Jim?
Okay. I think there's this idea of concept of storytelling is a little overdrawn. I think that it's always great to be able to tell a good story that really helps people go, wow, I want to be like that, or wow, whatever else it is. So I think the focus is still on how do we make the numbers so that we continue to have jobs and so that we please our customers, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think that there is there is a soft side to communication, and I agree with that. I just think the concern that I have is with a lot of communication people who are struggling because they are, I go back to what I said earlier, they're focused more on activity than they are on results and value. I've seen in the IABC lab, or hub it's called, what do we need to be measuring in internal communication? Well, we come back with, clicks and bytes and all that crap. But they never start with, well, we really got to start with something that matters to the business of the business. And so that's why I respond to them by saying, you need to move from activity to results and value. That is, you created value that you didn't have before at a cost that's less than the value you created. And that, bytes and story, how many times he's told the story, matter not to the customer nor to the financial community. So what I've been talking to a lot of communication people about is, how do you start making sure that you're focused on on-time delivery, you're focused on quality, OSHA recordables, just keep going on and on and on, because if communication people are attacking those things, the CEO is going to pay a lot more attention to the communication person than if they're worried about what story they're going to tell this afternoon. I don't mean to diminish storytelling. I tell stories too. I have told a few today. But my point is the storytelling is being the pinnacle of everything. It's not the result. It's, did you make money? Did you save money?
Yeah. I wonder that the information that you need to share with employees, that they're actually only interested in the space 5 meters around them. And because that is what they feel they can really impact. And for me, that was, I haven't tested it anywhere. I've never measured it. But for me, in my mind, that is also the type of information that I need to to make sense of as an employee. What is going on? What can I impact 5 meters around me? And what numbers are there, and how can I change that? And how can my team members change it? And for me, that is the, how much do you need to share? If you have to limit yourself, share at least this, that I will impact 5 meters around me.
Well, Brad, you're on mute.
So I was going to say, it sounds a little bit like some sort of COVID distancing at 2 meters, and now we got to go 5 meters for the number sharing part of things.
Yeah.
This
COVID thing's reminding me of back when I was in kindergarten. You sit over there, and you sit over there, and you don't bother John. And blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I like the 5 meters concept, Amanda, because what it helps, it also reinforces that it's not just about you as an individual, it's also you as you interact with other people and the impact that you have on the broader organization. So I really like that reference.
Yeah.
Well, it ties into the whole notion of a social network that exists within organizations of how things get done, which is not necessarily tied to the hierarchical pyramid. It's the connections that you have. I guess what I also heard on the storytelling side of things is use storytelling to help tell the stories behind the numbers and make them impactful, make it so that people care, make it so that people want to be a part of this open book and the success that they're making possible. I was going to ask a question a little bit about that last concept that Jack had put forward from the very, very beginning, which is that whole reward side of things. Is it possible to sort of, I'll say, out of the blue, just come up with the right rewards? Here's how we're going to share in the success system at the front end of things and nail it at the very beginning? Or is that sort of rewards thing something that gets fine-tuned over time? I guess I see all sorts of organizations go to, individual sharing or group level profit sharing or performance of this unit or group. So, how tough is it to put the reward system in place that match up with the communications things that we've got going on?
Well, does it matter that they're related to the communication things, or does a reward need to relate to the results and progress that we made? I would, if I were a reward system person, I wouldn't be doing it for the communication function. I would hope the communication function was sitting by my side with me, and we were trying to identify, okay, what is the best way from a compensation perspective to design a reward system for our organization. In some cases, it may be feel kind of top down. In some cases, it may be very high performance kind of rewards. So I think it varies with company.
Organization research tells us that the majority of employees, yes, they want to be compensated fairly. Yes, they want to be rewarded equally. But most important to employees is that they have a sense of contribution and belonging.
Yeah.
And so from open book management perspective, helping employees understand their purpose and how they actually contribute to the success of the organization, how they belong, is much more important than looking at how do we reward people for their performance.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the things that I see when I'm at the great game that they have in Dallas is that there is a sense of purpose. And that's really important for them. Whatever their purpose is, it may differ from one organization to another, but purpose is a bigger thing than talking about the pay system. I rarely hear pay conversations among open book management people. And that doesn't mean that they don't have reward systems or they don't communicate about it or talk about the effect that a downside or an upside had on the compensation, but they are more purpose-driven than they are reward-driven on the surface.
I think there's a balance between the two. Yes, the purpose is important, but somehow the people, my experience is the people must feel that we've been working so hard and we did not only achieve our targets, we exceeded our targets because we did this and this and this better. And to motivate people, I don't feel that, I don't support that people must be rewarded for excellence. They're supposed to be excellent. I feel that it would be motivating if there is somehow a reward system, a recognition system, that if you made the following changes, we recognize that. And I work with a couple of companies where they have the recognition systems, and if every year all these improvements are submitted for evaluation, and then there is a adjudication panel that sits and look at all these projects and all the numbers, because the people submit the numbers with their projects, and then decide that this one was the best in this category, and they will be recognized for that. And then in some cases there is a big financial reward as well. For instance, being very innovative in a project, and taking the numbers and say, well, if I do this innovation, I can really move the needle. Then there would be a significant reward and recognition for the person. I feel purpose is important, but especially on the lower levels, recognition and some kind of a bonus is motivating.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to also ask if I've been sort of intrigued by, or I've got the open book management bug now after having listened to this conversation, where do I turn to learn more? Jim, you've held up a book, but maybe we could go around and sort of like everybody. Where's the primer on open book management? How do I learn more about this concept?
Well, I've got about 6 books right behind me, for starters. But I would go back to you mentioned John Case. I would go back to John Case's first book that he came out with, and then I would go to 4 or 5 books. There are 3 or 4 others. I'll bring them over and I'll hold them up for you if you'd like. But I think if you go back to Change the Game, that's Jack's latest book. I think that would be a good book. Stay right there, and I'm going to show you 2 more books. You go ahead and talk, though.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, Amanda, do you want to jump in, or how did you learn about Open Book?
I worked for the National Productivity Institute, and we were all sent on a program to learn about Open Book Management. Yep. I
would go to books like that. The other thing that I would do, I would go to The Great Game. Now, this year it was remote in the sense that 1,000 people didn't converge on Dallas, the Hilton Anatole, which was disappointing because that is a very, very fun kind of an organization to go to. But I would contact, and I'll be glad to, if you really want some names, give you people at SRC, at The Great Game, who you can talk to, and same with people who are listening here. If they want that kind of information, I know most everybody who is in the leadership roles at SRC. I'd be glad to help with that, and anybody who wants to move that way.
Yeah, I'd also say look outside of open book management specifically, because you can read, study Lean Six Sigma. You can look at employee engagement research, performance management practices. All of those things contribute to how do you make it real for employees and take it out of kind of that management level financial reporting.
Yeah, I agree.
In fact, one of the references under Open Book Management on Wikipedia is a source called The Leadership Solution, a book created by our own Jim Schaefer a few years ago,
a few years ago.
A couple decades ago. Maybe you tell us what Leadership Solution has and how that ties into Open Book, and the cliff notes on your work from 2000.
Well, 2000, absolutely. There's a whole chapter in there about open book management, and I think that if you read the book, because it is about leadership, and it is about how to take organizations to new levels through strong leaders, not just at the top of the organization, but throughout the organization. And it's still very relevant. I have people call me, it came out in 2000, and call and say, this could have been written yesterday. It's the same sort of stuff. There's a little bit of stuff that's kind of oldish by now, but I think it still works. But there is a lot of conversation. All the thinking and philosophy and the approaches that I take in there are very compatible with OpenBook.
Is there a different set of hiring criteria for people who thrive in an open book management organization or not? I mean, do job descriptions get written differently based upon if we're using this sort of a system instead of a traditional hierarchical top-down driven, management knows better and management will decide kind of decision? Is there an HR side that has to move in parallel besides comp?
The one thing that I've seen in a few situations is where somebody who's being considered for a position is invited into the organization to spend some time, a day or 2 days or whatever it is, and it's explained very, very carefully to them what the SRC environment and culture is all about. And you get a real feel for it, as I said, when the communication people who I bring there, they walk out and they say, I'm blown away. I think what happens is that people start to see what's going on, and some gravitate to it because it sounds exciting. Some there's probably a middle ground with, and then there's another group of people who say, no way, I just would not fit in that kind of organization. I don't know if it's 80, 20, 20 or whatever percentage that might be, but I think they do a very, very good job of recruiting people, and they recruit people from organizations and from other places who think or like-minded with them, not necessarily to the extent of being the next SRC, but they think in terms of open communication, not downward communication, not telling people, a lot of listening, a lot of asking, and that sort of thing.
I'd agree with Jim that I'm sorry, go ahead, Amanda.
I think there will definitely be people that will resist open book management. Mm-hmm. And it would definitely be a specific personality type. I do not think you will get it on the operational levels. I think you will probably get it on the supervisor levels, and you will probably get it in the accounting division, just for the type of personality that they recruit in these roles. Todd?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with Jim that it's not necessarily how you're writing your recruitments. It's more the process that you apply in engaging candidates, exposing them to that very open and transparent organization during the interview process, giving them scenarios and getting them to respond, see how open they are, and sharing information. And then day one, once you've hired them day one, they need to see that commitment to transparency and openness is truly part of the culture, through the way people talk about the organization, the behaviors that they demonstrate as they're working with each other. So I think it'll become more critical for organizations to think about how are we engaging candidates to make sure we have the right people. Yeah,
I completely agree with you.
But Todd, what about if you've hired somebody 10 years ago and now you go open book, and now this people say, oh, open book, now what?
Yeah, that gets into the transition change management approach. So you can't, Jim mentioned, you can't just flip the switch and suddenly you're open book. You need to figure out what's the right amount of introduction so that we can get people on board. And then it's a lot of leadership work, making sure that the leaders are understanding what the intent is, and you get their actual agreement. Yes, I'm on board. Yes, I'm comfortable. Here's where I'm not comfortable. Here's what I need from you in order to become comfortable.
And for me, that is where the storytelling comes in, that the communicators must have a convincing story to tell and get people to support the whole idea and make them understand why it is important and why it is not negotiable to not be open about everything.
Yeah.
Maybe as we come to the top of the hour, I thought I'd ask each one of you to let me know just a little bit about the trend. I mean, are we seeing more organizations moving in this direction? Is this something that communications people are going to need to embrace more often, they're going to see in more organizations, or is it just sort of one of these management fad things that may play itself out sooner rather than later? What are each of you seeing?
I'll start that one. I think that the fad was a long time ago in OpenBook Management. I think organizations are operating that way a lot more. So I don't think it's a fad thing that's taking over anything. I think, what was the first part of your question you had right before you said that about the fad, Brad?
Well, are you seeing more and more organizations, I mean, more business coming your way to move in that OpenBook Management style now than before? I mean, is this communications people are going to see more and more of this in more and more places?
Well, I think where communication people are going to need to do different things is what I said earlier. Is I think you got to get out of the activity trap. You got to get out of well, I went and distributed this and it got out, or clicks were really big today. I think that's killing a lot of communication people, and the people who are surviving and the people who are really the hot shots out there are the ones who are creating the kind of results that they did at FedEx. Those were communication people working with that. The ITT, when communication people were working that. Ryder Logistics, the same thing. Conagra Foods, the same thing. The communication people were doing the work, but it was focused on getting results that mattered to the organization, not getting another newsletter out. So I think communication people have a choice, and they have two choices. One, keep doing what you've always been doing, and you'll keep making the same amount of money you always have. And you may like it. You may think it's really cool to see that somebody was reading your newsletter in the lunchroom. Or you can do what some of the people who I will be glad to share names of, who are not like that. They're people who have created these wins, and they're making, I'll tell you one. She was making $150,000 before she helped 3 organizations inside her organization. Today, I think she's at about $425,000. So what's happening, and I can tell you about 5, 6 other people in the communication area, if you're delivering results and value, meaning your gain is better than the cost, you're going to be worth more. So you have a choice. And it's pretty clear. A lot of people are looking for really top-notch, sharp communication people who are results-focused.
Well, and that in some ways ties into where I think IABC and communications people have been going in general. Maybe not full force, but I mean, the whole discipline for those who have ever entered an IABC gold quill competition is, what were your objectives? And they better be smart, that whole measurable thing, and they better be tangible, action-oriented. And can you prove that you actually have moved the needle? And it isn't, as Jim has said, about clicks and how many views and how did you put the thing out and how many people read it. It's about tell me what the business problem was that you're trying to solve and show that you had an impact in doing so. So in many ways, move to OpenBook Management reinforces the trend that IABC has been saying, you better get on top of this, communications people, from the get-go. Maybe just not quite as hands-on, and people need to be more comfortable with it. So I really do want to thank all of you guys for taking part in a great conversation, maybe opening some eyes to OpenBook. I also want to sort of give a plug for, I know, Amanda, you're going to be back next month for episode 62 of the Circle of Fellows, where the topic will be around communication and workplace safety. And Michelle Holtz, our regular moderator, will be welcoming in Alice Brink, Jim Lustachevsky, Martha Muzica, and Angela Sinicus to join you for that conversation a month from now. In the meantime, I want to thank Amanda Hamilton Atwell, Padish Hattori, Jim Schaefer for joining me, and a lot of thanks going to Anna Marie Willey, who works behind the scenes to put these programs together, to herd all of us cats to make sure that we're in the right place at the right time with the right topics and the right resources, and to our absent, because he's on personal holiday vacation, Michelle Holtz, for having put together this concept and making sure that it runs smoothly from a technology standpoint as well. So thanks to all of you, and thanks to all of you for joining and watching us.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Jim?